Today I'm gonna be showing you how to make super crispy chicken made in a Puerto Rican style. We call it chicharrones de pollo, and they are juicy, crispy, and most importantly, well-seasoned chicken. Now let's start with the ingredients that we're going to need. Here I'm using about 2.5 pounds of bone-in chicken thigh with the skin on, which is very important. The size of the chicken is not really that important here, but rather having the 2.5 pounds of chicken. To season the meat, you need very basic seasonings. Here we have 1 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt with half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. We also use 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of dry oregano, but if you don't have any, you can always use ground oregano. We also use 2 teaspoons of adobo seasoning, 1.5 teaspoons or 1 packet of sazon, which we'll use to give the chicken flavor and color. We also use a lemon. To coat the chicken, I use a combination of flours. I use 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and I also add half a cup of cornstarch. Here I have 4 pieces of chicken thigh, but how many thighs you will have will depend on how big or small you find the chicken thigh. But you could go with the weight, and that's what matters. The first thing we have to do is clean the chicken because the thighs almost always come with an excess skin and also a lot of fat. It is good for the chicken to have a little bit of fat, but not too much. Some of that fat will melt while frying, but not all of it, and biting into a blob of fat is not very pleasant. That's why we remove all the excess. Later on, I'll tell you what to do with those pieces of excess skin. I tend to cut the chicken thigh into 3 pieces, but if any of the pieces of chickens are way too big, like mine, you could cut them into halves and you'll get 4 pieces instead of 4 by cutting that piece without the bone in the middle like I'm showing you here. But you could really cut the chicken however you want. Then I chop the chicken where the bone is, right there in the middle. But to do this, it's very important that you have a very sharp knife because you won't be able to cut into the bone properly. I had to sharpen my knife before chopping the chicken to make sure I got clean cuts. Now, this is how your chicken pieces will look. This little bit has a little bit of fat, and that's okay because it only has a little bit and it will melt when frying. So there are parts of the chicken that will have a little bit of fat, but you don't need to cut the meat because if you do so, you'll end up cutting a lot more meat along with the fat. What I like to do is to kind of scrape the fat off with the knife and it will come out easily. It is super easy to remove. Then I remove the excess skin. Now, many people don't like the skin of the chicken, but if you're like me and that is also your favorite part, you just have to clean that extra pieces very well. Remove any skin or feathers that it might have. Then you season it with the rest of the meat and then fry it. And let me tell you, it is super delicious. Here we continue cutting the chicken. You'll repeat this process with the entire chicken until you manage to cut them all. You have to be careful when you're cutting the meat so you don't cut your own fingers trying to chop the bone. I like to chop it like this, mostly into 3 pieces that aren't too big or too small. Note about the chicken is that if you don't like the thighs, you can always use chicken breast for this recipe. Then we mix all the seasonings in a small bowl. Many people like to add a little bit of oil to the seasoning to moisten the chicken and so the seasoning can spread better. But in our case, it's not necessary because that's what we use the lemon for. After all the seasonings are mixed, we need to save a full tablespoon of it because we will use it to flavor our flours so the chicken cracklings have flavor not only in the meat but also in the flour as well. Next, we take the lemon. The first thing you have to do with this yellow lemon is to roll it on your table, applying a little bit of pressure so that the juices are released from the inside. But if you don't have any lemon, you could also use a lime. I like to cut off the tips of the lemon so I could be able to squeeze it better. And also I cut it in half. Next, you'll need a large bowl to put all the chicken in it to season it. Then we take the lemon and we squeeze it over the chicken. I'm using a citrus juicer here, but you could do it by hand. The thing is, the juicer is really easy to use and it also gets all the juice out of the lemon. The lemon juice will do 2 things here. First, and the most important thing, is that it will add flavor to the meat. And second, it will help us moisten the chicken so the seasoning can stick better. Then what we have to do is to add the seasonings to the meat and mix it well. We need to make sure that we season every little crease the chicken has. If you don't like using your hands to season the chicken, you could always use gloves, but I don't mind. I just simply wash my hands before and after handling the chicken. A note on the chicken is that if you don't like chicken thighs, you could always use chicken breasts. I just prefer to use thighs because they tend to be a juicier cut of chicken and it makes a better fried chicken because it won't dry as fast as when using chicken breast. You also may be wondering if you have to leave the meat to marinate for some time, but the answer is no. This chicken will still have great flavor. You just have to season it right before using it and you're good to go. dough. And this is how your meat should look after being seasoned. It already looks full of flavor. It is already starting to look good. Next, we need to prepare our breading. In a large dish, we pour all the flour, the cornstarch, and the tablespoon of seasonings that we previously saved. We like to do this so our flour can have some flavor. Then we have to mix well so that the seasoning is distributed more or less evenly throughout the flour. Then we'll proceed to bread the chicken. Breading the chicken is very easy. All you need to do is take the chicken and make sure everything is covered in flour. You can also use a freezer bag. You just have to add the flour, add the chicken, and mix it around. You just have to make sure that every part of your pieces of chicken are fully breaded. What I like to do is I like to sprinkle some flour and press it down with my hand so the flour could stick better. Then the most important thing when making this chicharrón de pollo is to raise the skin, so there you can add a little bit of flour to make sure everything is super crispy. Then after adding all the flour, make sure to remove all excess flour, because otherwise the chicken will have a strong flour taste, which is not pleasant. We want to repeat this process with the entire chicken, always making sure that everything is well coated, the areas next to the bone and everywhere. Then we shake off any excess and we place it on the tray or a plate. Now, a note about the chicken: if you coat the chicken with the breading, then you take a while to fry it, your coating will start to change color and it will start to look moist, and this can change the texture when you fry it. That's why I like to coat the chicken right before frying. And remember that if you want to leave your meat marinating, you could do so, but before breading it, because if you save the chicken already breaded, it will have another texture when frying, because when you thaw the chicken, the flour will moisten, it will get wet, and then it's not the same. Next, in a caldero or large pot, add approximately 2 cups of oil over medium-high heat. You'll need more or less oil depending on where you're frying your chicken. I'm using a medium-sized caldero. Here, I added 4 small pieces of chicken. So we're going to cook this chicken for 12 minutes. I like to flip mine after they've been cooking there for 6 minutes. But look how they look after 6 minutes. This chicken already looks good. It looks super delicious. Make sure you don't add too much chicken to fry all at once. You don't want the chicken to be all on top of each other. If this is the case, it's better to cook the chicken in batches. Another thing is that if you want to make your chicken in advance, you could do so. For example, in this video here, I made it around noon, but at dinner time, which was around 6 p.m., I reheated the chicken. What I did was fry it again, and this, in addition to reheating it, it made it extra crispy. So you could give the chicken the 12 minutes it takes to cook, then you save it. When you take it out, you just have to refry it for even more crispiness. You can even wait for it to completely cool and then freeze it. When it's ready, simply fry it again. And here's the result. These are chicharrones de pollo, Puerto Rican style, super crispy and very juicy chicken. Look how well they cooked after just 12 minutes. The best part about this recipe is that if you don't want to fry the chicken, you can make this in an air fryer. All you have to do to get this chicken super crispy, you just have to season it, you bread it, and before cooking, you have to spray it with non-stick cooking spray. Then you just cook it and you will have crispy chicken. It is not the same as frying, but it is still a really good recipe. Below in the description box, I'll leave you the link to the full recipe in case you want to view it or print it. Buen provecho and thanks for watching.